to this tutorial on presentations. So as you've seen on the slide, it says it. We're going to be talking about what to prepare and what needs to be said in a presentation. You're going to have two types of presentations for this project. So you have client meetings and teacher meetings. Let's get started with the client meetings. Some of the things on the list only apply to the first meeting, and some only apply to everything besides the first meeting. I'll let your judgment do the assessments. First things first, introduction. You want to introduce your team, yourself, and anything you feel relevant to the subject so that your client has a better understanding of who you guys are, not just, oh, students doing a project, period. You want to do a recap since last meeting, so it helps you build a good starting point. So something like, we've talked about this last time, and since those discussions, this is what we've come up with, and you start your meeting like that. Sprint backlog is basically the list of features that you need to get signatures on that you have completed as part of the previous sprints that you had promised. Next sprint planning is what you're planning to do for the next sprint. I think this is self-explanatory. Mockups, as we've talked about in the deliverables, and you have a mockup tutorial to more depth to this. But this is a key opportunity to get a feel of alternate directions the project could go and get feedback from the client. When it's visual, they tend to have a more down-to-earth feedback versus when you're explaining as broad as words. And last but not least is demo the features, which is you're going to spend most of your time in that meeting doing, and getting as much feedback as you can, because any word or any hint that the client is saying or facial expression gives you a hint of what you need to change to get a better feel and basically make your project better. Something that people tend to forget, and this is a very common mistake, is you put a lot of content on your slides, and sometimes what you're saying is not 100% intertwined with what is on the slides. It's more of a completion than actually just repeating what is on the slides. And this is where you tend to lose your client, whereas you have a lot on the slides, they're reading this, they're not listening to you, or they're listening to you, and then when they look at the slides, it doesn't make sense to them. So ideally what I recommend is having titles or very general topics on your slides, and what you're saying is what is that topic about. Or some people like to have more details on their slides because they're visual and it helps them a lot. Then what you do is whatever is on the slides is what you're saying, so that there's no lost content in your communication. For the next part is going to be about your teacher meetings. This is the technical part. So anything that has to do with actual code, software architecture, is going to be here. First of all, introduce yourself, your team, and for next, every time, give a brief recap of what is the project that you're doing, what platform you're on, so it helps them know where you guys are at. Again, recap since last time, same as the client meetings. SAD, software architecture is very essential here because this is what the teacher is looking at and evaluating. Just have your diagrams and basically know how to explain them and not have some boxes there just because, oh, well, we thought everything that's on that diagram needs to be explained if asked. Architecture and coding patterns, just so you know, if they choose a feature they want to look at and you had an architecture built into this or a coding pattern that you're using, you need to know the pros and cons of why did you use that pattern and not just say, oh, it's good use, it's good practice. Git commits link to issues. Very essential in your Git signature when you're doing your commits to link them to issues so that during these presentations, if the teacher asks to see a commit, he or she knows about what issue it's connected to, or vice versa by saying, I want to see every commit that's linked to that feature, and due to those commit signatures, you're going to be able to see all the commits. Retrospective is the last part where you do a retro analysis of your team, yourself, what worked, what doesn't work, and what you wanted to be doing more of and what you want to be doing less of, and things you should stop doing. Little side note, things like leaving documentation to the last minute, that's one of those stop doing. Last but not least is if in these presentations you'll be showing diagrams. Some teams tend to come up, plug their laptop to the screen, and then they try to zoom in to show the teacher. It's not readable. It gives off a very bad impression of professionalism in terms of the team, and also a bad impression of the project, whereas it's not necessarily relevant. But just so you know, make sure that if you are going to use an external screen, make sure that the diagrams actually load up there and are readable. And if not, have alternatives, like a laptop to have next to the teacher, so you show the diagrams on the TV, as well as the teacher is able to read them off of a laptop. I'll leave you with a quote because it's very essential. You know that every team member needs to talk. And if you know you have a team member that can't do well in public speaking, it's your job as a team to help each other and basically train them. Any presentations you're going to do for this is, I think, as relevant as doing interviews, and you're face to a person and you have to explain something. So practice makes perfect.